times.
I need to turn the room light.
We're recording it now. Yeah, sorry I missed you guys. On Tuesday, I got called into a meeting that I couldn't avoid. On last Thursday, I was taking my wife to the doctor. So sorry, I didn't have control. It was out of my control. Okay, so the last thing that you guys did, you guys watched the video and the last thing you got was M for unemployment, right? So let's go to N like November. N for rugged individualism. Rugged individualism. All right, so President Hoover, he believes in something called rugged individualism. And what this is, it's not his idea. This is an idea that's existed within America forever, right? Forever. If it's quiet where you guys are, can I have you guys just unmute your microphones? That way we can have like a normal conversation, as long as your background is still quiet. He believes in this thing called rugged individualism, and rugged individualism is the basic idea that all individuals succeed or fail by themselves. That we succeed or we fail by ourselves. We are the ones responsible for whether or not we succeed. Okay, so what this means is that if you're rich, it's because of you. If you're poor, it's because of you. If you got fired from your job, it's because of you. You're the one responsible, and so you are the one to blame, and you're also the one who gets the credit, right? So to a degree, I think everyone kind of agrees with this to a certain extent, right? You certainly have a lot of control over your life and make a lot of decisions, right? But what Hoover's doing, and what's important in your notes to say, is that Hoover is saying this in response to communism. This is in response to communism, and we're going to do in the next chapter, we'll spend an entire class period on communism and fascism and stuff. So he's responding to communism. The far left, communism is the far left, and the far left believes that the individual doesn't exist. There's no such thing as an individual. That you, Sam and Fernanda, don't exist as people. What you do is you exist as influences from everything around you. Your decision to log into my class today is not because you as an individual chose to do that. You logged into my class today because you have society pressuring you to take the class, and you have your mom who's going to beat your butt if you don't get past my class, and you have you have these influences that are telling you to take that you like the history class, and you have all these other different influences that you have pushing on you that have forced you to make the only decision you could have made was log into my class, right? If you could have made another decision, you would have made another decision, right? Because you would have had different forces on you, right? If you were going to log into my class, but then your crush comes and your crush knocks on your door and says, hey, why don't we go hang out, right? Then you have another force acting upon you and you go out with your crush, right? But since I'm guessing that didn't happen to either of you today, that's why you're here in my class, right? Right? Does that sound fair?
Sure.
So the far left says that individuals don't really exist. We're all just groups. The far right says that groups don't really exist. We're all just individuals. That we're all individuals making our individual choices. It's just some of us make the same choice and it looks like a group. Hoover's pretty far to the right. He pretty firmly believes in that far right individual side, right? Most Americans, I think, would agree that they're kind of mixed, right? Most Americans agree that they're mixed. I feel like I'm an individual, right? It feels like I'm an individual. It feels like I chose to go to work today. I feel like I chose to eat lunch today, right? I chose to marry the woman I married. I chose to buy the car I bought, right? Like it feels like I've made a lot of choices in my life. But I also recognize that I am definitely influenced by people around me, right? I'm definitely influenced by my parents, my friends, my society, my government, my television and social media and all this other crap, really, whatever, religion and religion and society and whatever, right? All these things are influencing me. I definitely can tell that that's true, right? So I think most of us would agree that we're somewhere in the middle. Hoover is far further to the right. Now, on a certain intellectual level, he's probably true. You are responsible for your success and you are responsible for your failure on a certain intellectual level, right? But is that answering the emotional truth that's going on in her mind right now? Right? The emotional truth is I lost my job. My husband lost his job. We are homeless. I'm raising my girl, I'm raising my daughter here in a trash dump. Right? When these people ask Hoover for help, Hoover's response is, it's your fault. You wouldn't have gotten laid off if you had a better job. You made the choice to work at that factory, and that factory closed down. You could move. You could get a different job. You could go back to school and get a degree. You could do all these other things. That's the Hoover response. And that's the pretty offensive response to a lot of people, right? Maybe it's true. Maybe this woman right here does need to go back to school and get a degree. Maybe, right? But that's not what's on her mind right now. What's on her mind is that her daughter is in a trash dump. That's what's on her mind, right? This is where a lot of Americans are going to find Hoover very quite offensive. They're gonna have a real problem with Hoover. All right. Hoover passes the Hawley Smoot tariff. Go ahead and put Hawley Smoot tariff in there. You can put Hoover passes it. It's named after the two senators that wrote the bill, Hawley and Smoot. That's their last names. So he signs this Hawley Smoot tariff. Sam, do you know what a tariff is?
It's like a tax on goods,
Yeah,
isn't it?
good. You're correct. It's a tax on what kind of goods?
Imported goods.
Good. Perfect. Perfect. It's a tax on foreign goods. A tax on imported goods or foreign goods. Either way is fine. Yeah, it's a tax on imported goods. The Hawley Smoot tariff basically raises a tariff on all imported goods. What's Hoover trying to do? What's his goal?
Make the U.S. Very individualized, so it doesn't need to depend on other countries.
Okay, partly. What is he trying to get American customers to do? He wants them to buy goods from where?
The U.S.
Yeah. He's trying to get Americans to buy American products, right? And if Americans buy American products, then American companies make the money, American workers do the work, right? Americans pay their taxes, right? Like he's trying to get us to buy American. What's the problem with it? What's the problem with all tariffs? It's the same problem that comes up every time we make a tariff. Fernanda, what do you expect the problem to be?
I don't really know.
Well, if I'm the United States and I pass a tariff on everything, and Fernanda, you are France, and Sam, you're England, and I just made all of your goods more expensive, what are you going to do to me?
Make our goods more expensive, or
Yeah,
make your goods more expensive.
make American goods more expensive, right? The same thing is your countries all just pass tariffs on American goods, right? And as soon as you do that, the result here is American companies lose business. We lose business because we actually have more foreign customers than we do domestic customers. If you look on a map, this is a pretty advanced geography for you, but if you look on a map, you'll see that not America is bigger than America, right? If you look on a map, right, and you color in all of the America part purple, and then you color in everything that's not America yellow, you're going to find that the yellow part is way bigger. Right? Sam's that check out? You look like you're doing some advanced map making in your mind.
Well, you're like not America and America. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, I know. It's a funny way to phrase it, right? But as it turns out, the world is way bigger than the United States, apparently. Apparently, right? And so when you cut off all of those global customers, American businesses suffer because most of our customers are global, right? Anyway, this makes the depression worse. It increases unemployment and makes things worse. Womp womp. All right. So we have bank runs. We have a high unemployment. We just increased our unemployment. So things can't get possibly worse. They're going to get worse. Big number N. Is it N?
Oh,
O? Are we on O?
oh,
Okay. All right. Big number O. Oh, big number O, Hoovervilles. With the unemployment, people start to lose their homes and they start to move into Hoovervilles. A Hooverville. A Hooverville is a squatter settlement. It's a shanty town. In your geography class, they would have used the term squatter settlement, probably. Most Americans call it a shanty town. What it is a large, unofficial, it's an unofficial, often illegal, temporary housing collection of people who built houses out of whatever they could find. It's a temporary housing situation where people built houses out of whatever they could find. So the Hoovervilles, the first one shows up in Chicago, but pretty soon they start showing up all over the country. And they start showing up, these are people just grabbed whatever boards they could find, whatever pieces of wood or metal they could find, and they just nailed them together as best they could to make a house. They start showing up everywhere in the country. And they all name them after the president, President Hoover, right? Because America is very quick to blame the president, right? When something bad happens, you blame the dude in charge, right? Whether he deserves it or not, it doesn't matter. You blame him because he's the guy in charge, right? And so they blame Hoover. Hoover hates this, hates this. He starts to order them to tear these down, and they start tearing them down all over the place. This is the big Chicago one, and the Chicago one gets torn down. What's the problem? They could run bulldozers right through this. They could run everyone out. They burn it down. What's the problem?
they just rebuild. Their
Yeah,
scraps aren't being taken away.
yeah. They just, I mean, they did take the scrap away. They burned it and hauled it away, but they'll just find more, right? The problem is you didn't solve the problem, right? You didn't solve the problem. You still have unemployment. You still don't have houses. You still don't have anything. And when they ask Hoover, they say, hey, Hoover, you don't want us to have Hoovervilles. Why don't you build these people houses? He says, it's not my
It,
problem.
yeah.
He says, it's your problem, right? So this is a big deal. Okay. P, big number P. Okay. If you thought America was doing too good, let's ramp it up a little bit more. P stands for the Dust Bowl.
The Dust Bowl.
Dust Bowl. So the Dust Bowl starts happening across the United States, where we start getting these giant sandstorms. Massive, massive sandstorms. That's not a cloud. That's not rain. That's sand. And we start getting these huge sandstorms going across the middle of the country. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, right? These huge, huge dust storms. These dust storms in Arabic, in English, we don't really have a word for it, but in Arabic, the word is habub, habab, Haboub, Haboub. And it's a giant, dangerous sandstorm. We get some cases where the sandstorm will bury houses and bury entire houses floor to ceiling within just 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, we get like this. If you picture this, picture like walking around in something like this, where the sand is pelting you in the face, stinging your face, getting in your eyes, getting in everything. This is your farm afterwards, right? There's kids in Kansas waiting for the bus. Kind of looks like coronavirus, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like coronavirus. Yeah. Here's this car here in Texas. This is the same car 10 years ago, 10 years later, after the Dust Bowl is over.
6.
or 6 years. Yeah. Pretty crazy, huh?
Do we know why?
We do. Yeah. Let's put in our notes causes of the Dust Bowl. So, cause number one is pretty easy. It's a drought. So, cause number one, it's a drought. DROUGHT. It just means we didn't get rain, right? And this is one of the worst droughts in American history. It had been going on for about 10 years. Okay, so it's a really bad drought. We right now are in a drought. California is in a drought right now. Texas is in a drought. Texas hasn't had a normal rain year in almost 15 years. Today, 2020. Okay, we are in a drought today. In fact, the drought we're in today is the worst drought ever. It's the worst drought ever recorded. So this is a drought, but it's not quite as bad. If you look on the map here, the orange part, this bright orange part, is basically just becomes sand. Like it basically is just buried sand. And this yellowy part here becomes severely damaged areas, severely damaged, where we have entire farmlands just gone. The biggest cause of this is not the drought. The biggest cause is what we call the Great Plow Up. The Great Plow Up. The Great Plow Up is all through the 1920s, farmers were using brand new farm equipment like tractors, a new invention. These new inventions like tractors. And by using these new inventions, the farmers dug up the entire Midwest of the country, from Texas all the way to North Dakota. They basically dug the whole thing up and turned it all into farms. The big problem is they tore up all the native grass. Normally, this is grassland, right? What happens when you tear up all the native grass?
Oh, it doesn't have anything to like secure it down. That's like when you have like big hills of like stuff you need like roots in order to like secure things.
Yeah. So the plants help prevent erosion, both water erosion and wind erosion. The Dust Bowl is wind erosion, essentially, right? So what ends up happening is we get all of the native grass is basically gone. And so when you have a big giant farm, right, in a normal circumstance, if it's just me, Farmer Veenstra, I can really only handle like a pretty small farm, something like maybe 4 times the size of my classroom, maybe, right? But now that you've given me a tractor, I can handle something 100 times as big as my classroom, right? So I dig the entire thing up, the entire thing, I laid it all out, and then I go and I plant, and I'm going to plant the best Brussels sprouts in the world, and I'm going to grow them. You guys are going to eat them and love them, right? And the problem is that it's all dirt, and I'm waiting for the rain. Well, the rain never comes, but eventually the wind does, and the wind starts kicking it up and kicking it up and kicking it up, and here we are. Yeah, this was a man-made disaster. Humans did this. Yeah. All right. We didn't know it at the time. We didn't know it at the time until after the Dust Bowl, and we figured it out, and we're like, oh, I see. That's a real problem. That's why today we know about this today, which is why the worst drought in world history today happening in Texas has not produced dust storms, because we left the grass. Like we replanted the grass. Like it's still there, right? We learned from our mistakes. So good job. Good job, people of the past. Learning from your mistakes. Nicely done. All right. The result of the Dust Bowl. Okay, let's put our results. Results of the Dust Bowl. So the results of the Dust Bowl is, first of all, the middle of the country reaches about a 70% unemployment rate. 7-0. The middle of the country is devastated. Okay. Our best farmland is also destroyed, which makes the price of food more expensive across the entire country. Lastly, massive migration leaving, mostly going to California. Now, Fernanda, do you think the Californians are going to open their arms and welcome the people from Oklahoma and say, "Welcome, Oklahoma, to the Sunshine State. Enjoy our beaches and beautiful women"? Does that
No,
sound? No, you don't think so? What do you
Mm-mm.
think California is going to do?
I feel like they're not gonna let them in. They're just gonna kind of like, yeah, kick them out.
Yeah.
Well, at
So
least try.
so California tries to keep them out. California puts up guards and like soldiers and stuff on its border to try to keep them out. But under the US Constitution, can one state keep another state out?
No.
No, that's not how it works, right? That's not how it works. We have freedom of movement around our country. We can go where we want to go. So if Oklahomans want to move to California, they can, right? The result is giant, massive Hoovervilles filled with Oklahomans, filled with Okies, is what they call them. Yeah, massive, massive Hoovervilles. Okay, here's the other result, and keep going here. The other result is California is going to deport the Mexicans inside of it. Now, this may not surprise you, but when economic conditions get bad, people blame immigrants. Shocking, huh? Yeah. So people start to blame the Mexicans. At this time period, all through the 1920s, California had something called a guest worker program. And the guest worker program allowed millions of Mexicans to travel up into California and work in all the farms, right? And like picking fruit and doing all the farm work. And then at the end of the season, they would move back down to Mexico and bring their money back down with them, right? That had worked for decades in California because the native-born Americans, the white people, didn't want to do that work. They didn't want to go work in the farms, right? And so the Mexicans said, "We'll work there." And so it worked really, really well. California shuts off its guest worker program in 1931, and they shut off the guest worker program, and then they start deporting 2 million Mexicans. Here's the biggest problem. Of the 2 million Mexicans they deport, about a million of them to maybe 1.5 million of them are American born. The Californians were not very careful with who they were deporting. They just deported everyone who was brown, basically. Right? Even if the guys would be like, "Hey, dude, I'm not Mexican. I'm from Guatemala." The Californians would be like, "We don't care. Get in the truck." Right? Or you'd say like, "Hey, I'm born in the United States." They say, "What, is your name Gonzalez?" "Yeah." "Oh, get in the truck." Right? They just started deporting everybody. Right? And including at least 1 million of these people who they speak Spanish, they're brown, they got brown eyes, but they're born in California, right? They live there, they speak English also, right? They just get deported. The US ends up losing about 1/3 of its Mexican population by doing this. It's a huge, huge number, a huge number. And about 1 million of these people get sent back into Mexico, and many of them had never stepped foot in Mexico in their entire life. They were born in California, right? Maybe their last name is Gonzalez. Maybe they're Mexican heritage, right? Like their last name is Hernandez or Garcia or something, right? But they've never been to Mexico. We also get food riots around the entire country. The price, the Dust Bowl, the other repercussion of the Dust Bowl, the other effect of the Dust Bowl is food riots across the country. Because food has become more expensive now. This is a riot in Minneapolis. Yeah. Pretty great, huh? Stock market crashes, unemployment, Hoovervilles, Dust Bowl, right? Sounds great. I know. Sam, you were saying that the US has it too easy. All right. Well,
Yeah.
let me help you out here. We'll add some more to it. All right. Give me big number Q. Big number Q is the Bonus Army March. So in 1931, the US government has no money. And so the US government stops paying veterans their money. They stop paying the veterans money. Now, it's called bonus money, but it's not a bonus like extra. Like when we say bonus, we usually mean extra. That's not what it is. The bonus money is money being paid to veterans who were injured in World War I. So these are like veterans, like you lost your leg in World War I, for example, and so the government pays you like $200 a month for the rest of your life because you lost your leg. Right? Does that make sense? They call it, the Army calls it bonus pay. They call it bonus pay because it's in addition to a salary, like if you had a salary, but it isn't a bonus like extra, right? And so for a lot of these veterans, they rely on this money. It's the only thing they have to feed themselves, right? So what ends up happening is veterans from all over the country, World War I vets from around the country, they all travel to Washington, D.C. And they all move to Washington, D.C. to demand their money. They create the largest Hooverville in the country in Washington, D.C. Look at that. The largest Hooverville in the country in Washington, D.C., right outside of the Capitol. Now, what do you think President Hoover is going to do about this? What do you expect, Sam?
Plow it down.
Yeah, wait a minute, Sam. Are you telling me that you don't think President Hoover will start paying the veterans their money?
No.
You don't think
Plow
so?
it down. Burn it.
Wow, that's really shocking to me. Shocking. I would expect them. Don't we respect our veterans all the time? I thought that, isn't that what they tell me all the time, is that we respect our veterans?
It's their fault that they lost their pay.
Oh, I see. All right. Well, unfortunately, Sam is right. Unfortunately, Sam's right. Hoover orders the Army to invade the Hooverville and destroy it. And so they do. Take a moment with this picture here. Take a moment with this picture. Veterans stabbing cops using an American flag as the weapon. What ends up happening is that as the police and as the Army raid the bonus Army camps, the veterans start to fight back. The veterans basically say, you taught us to fight. You taught us how to fight and you're starting a fight. All right, we'll do this. Right? The vets are like, I'm already dead anyway. You've already taken away my ability to feed myself. So what do I got? And so they fight. 2 veterans get killed and a baby who's there also. A baby gets gassed and dies from tear gas. And they get fighting. This picture becomes one of the most famous pictures of the Great Depression. Cops beating up veterans. Here's them burning down the bonus Army village, and there's the US Capitol in the background. Yeah, not great. The result of the bonus Army march is the election of 1932. The bonus Army march happens. The bonus Army march happens just a few months before the election. Hoover gets destroyed in this election. Franklin Roosevelt is going to become our new president, and Franklin Roosevelt is very, very different from Hoover. Franklin Roosevelt believes that the government can help and that it should help. So Roosevelt is going to spend all of his effort trying to help as much as possible. Hoover spends his effort not trying to help, and Roosevelt's going to spend his effort trying to help. Okay, so we'll pick up with Roosevelt next class period. All right, do you guys have any questions? I'm stopping the recording now.